So good morning, everybody, people who are present here and members who are also online. Due to the level of public interest in this meeting, it is actually being live streamed. So please can I remind members when you are speaking to make sure that you use the microphones so that those online can hear loudly and clearly. If anybody is struggling to hear the speakers, please raise your hands. Just to inform you, there's been a slight amendment to the order of the agenda items today. Item 8, briefing on the home to school transport policy post-implementation.
Yes, I have apologies from Stephen Jennings, David Sharp, Councillor Hull, with Councillor Basterman acting as substitute, and we also have Councillor Jefferson and Martin McCauley joining by Teams.
Thank you, Alice. Can I please remind councillors that the expectation is that they will attend formal meetings of the council in person, as the law does not currently allow remote attendance. As such, if you are unable to attend, then please can you nominate a substitute to attend on your behalf. In exceptional circumstances, members can attend remotely via Teams where the technology is in place. If you attend by Teams, then please note that you will not be able to propose, second, amend or vote on the motion, and legally this cannot be recorded on the council's systems as having attended the meeting that you were present via Teams. So item number 3 on the agenda, can I ask if members are happy to approve these minutes as an accurate record, correct record? Yes. Thank you. I will actually sign them later on because the system has changed where I have to sign and date every single page. So we won't take up time with doing that at the moment. Thank you. Item number 4, declarations of interest. For openness and transparency, if you wish to declare an interest in agenda item 6, particularly if you're a member of the, the appeals committee of the home to school transport, I declare an interest. I'm a member of that panel. So record. Thank you, Councillor Slater, Councillor Ritchie, Councillor. Beg your pardon, Councillor Peacock, I didn't see your hand up.
Yes, it's just to say that I'm declaring an interest because I'm a private hire driver. I am no longer an operator, but I'm a private hire driver, and so therefore I will declare this prejudicial interest, and I'll be leaving the meeting for that agenda item 8.
Thank you, Councillor Peacock. For those people who are on the Home to School Transport Appeals Committee, you can actually participate. Sorry, yeah, members of the Appeals Committee can participate. Sorry, can you hear me now? But, I'll just repeat what I've said. Yes, members of the Appeals Committee can participate in the discussions today. because it will focus on the proposed scope and timings of the post-implementation review and not the development, implementation and application of the policy. And we recognise, thank you, that Councillor Peacock, you will withdraw during that discussion. Thank you. So item number 5, public questions and statements. We have 3 statements to be received today. Joe Foster from the Stag Group actually has 2 statements, so you actually have 6 minutes to say your statements, and after you, then it will be Mr. Shepherd, who you will have 3 minutes. So if you'd like to come over there and sit there and press the microphone when it goes green, you can speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Yeah, I should explain. I've actually got a statement about the appeals process, which is I'm actually reading on behalf of my friend here, kind of Kate Helm. But I think in the interest of time, we've been asked to just have one speaker. So if it's okay, I'll start with that one. Then I've got my one is actually about the policy review. So I'll do if it's okay, I will do the appeals one first. Okay. So thank you for letting us speak today. We just need to say that parents across North Yorkshire have lost faith in this council's transport appeals process. They are sick of being put through a system that feels more concerned with protecting policy than protecting people. There are 2 examples here of what's going wrong. First of all, restrictions on representatives. 6 weeks ago, parents attending stage 2 hearings were entitled to take a representative, just as they can in every other council in the land. They could work as a team to present the case clearly and take part in the question and answer sessions. But from the 11th of August, that changed. Parents arrived to be told without notice that new restrictions were in place. Representatives now could only make a short closing statement and were barred from asking or answering questions directly. Families who were prepared for weeks walked in to find the rules rewritten, and 5 weeks on, this gagging order remains in place. The motivation behind this move is unknown but worrying. Appeals must be based on fairness, and to pile extra pressure on parents in this way tilts the balance in the council's favour. One Conservative councillor has described the process as rigged to give the authority an easy ride. Second, the handling of mistakes. We know now that a catalogue of errors have been made in applying the policy. For example, school gates missing from maps, unviable routes used to calculate nearest schools, and the now accepted plethora of communication failures. These same issues are cropping up week after week in appeals, and yet too many parents are still being denied transport on the back of them, mistakes made by the council, not by them. I'm talking here, by the way, about mistakes which are acknowledged, not ones that are contested. Richard Flinton has at last confirmed that such errors are indeed valid grounds for appeal, and yet families still face a total lottery. 1 week transport is granted on the back of accepted communication failures. The next week, a case could be rejected on exactly the same grounds. Parents compare notes, and no wonder that they're furious. Parents now attend stage 2 hearings simply to go through the motions. Many feel their only real hope for a fair trial lies with the Ombudsman. They describe the process as humiliating, upsetting and pointless. And I think for those who've been in it, they've probably seen plenty of tears as well. They're wondering what tricks are going to be played next. And just last week, parents who requested minutes from their meeting were refused and told they must.
Thank you. You just made it in time. Sorry, there will be a response from Daniel Harry. Beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Daniel Harry, I'm the Head of Democratic Services and Scrutiny at the Council and have oversight of the homeschool transport appeals process. So in response to your public statement, I will reply. The written guidance sent to appellants in advance of the stage 2 appeals hearings explains that they can be accompanied to the hearing if they wish, for example, by a support worker, friend or relative. Those people attending a stage 2 appeal as a supporter can still make a statement at the meeting, and supporters can raise any points of clarification or questions through the appellant. There has been no restriction. The role of the Appeals Homeschool Transport Committee when considering a stage 2 appeal is to assess whether the homeschool transport policy that was adopted by this council in July 2024 has been correctly applied, and then to assess whether there are any exceptional individual circumstances that are significant enough to merit a departure from the policy. This is in line with DfE guidance, Travel to School for Children of Compulsory School Age 2024. It is and always has been acceptable for appellants to submit information regarding the measurement of statutory walking distances to the nearest school, the safety of walked route to the nearest school, and the suitability of transport travel arrangements for an eligible child. All appeals are considered on their merits, and this has been consistent throughout the process. The Policy Implementation Review will look at the administration of the home to school travel policy, including a summary of the inquiries, complaints, appeals, and the Council's responses to those. What I would also say, in addition to what's written, is the comments about the Chief Executive's statement have been taken out of context. What I'll do is I'll read from the correspondence previously that's taken place with Joe Foster and the Stag directly. Parents and carers are able to appeal against a decision made by the local authority regarding school transport in relation to the following: child's eligibility, the distance measured of the walked route, the safety of the walked route, consideration of exceptional circumstances, the transport arrangements made. Where it is felt that errors have been made in the application of the home to school travel policy, then these can be raised by the appellant as part of the context for the appeal and also the exceptional individual circumstances. So again, clearly an appellant can gather whatever information they feel will help their case at stage 2. It's important to clarify this is a stage 2 process. Appellants have already been through a stage 1 process where their appeal has not been upheld. So at stage 2, the emphasis upon the appellant to provide additional information that may have been missed at stage 1 or has subsequently come to light, which enables the Homeschool Transport Appeals Committee to consider again whether the policy has been correctly applied and whether there are any exceptional individual circumstances that should apply. Thank you.
Joe, you actually have, you're entitled to a short supplementary question before you move on.
It was just really to state, it has changed. On the 4th of August, anybody who was representative could speak freely, answer and ask questions. Now they can't. And I think we're in agreement that we're saying that actually any errors that are made are valid to be talked about and discussed and considered in the appeal. So I'm not sure I quite agree that it's been taken out of context, and I think we agree on that part. But it is true to say the appeals has changed, and I don't really think. I mean, it's just fact. But we may have to agree to differ on that one, Daniel.
Thank you, Joe. Your next statement, which is yours, I believe.
Okay, thank you. So this I think I know it's on the agenda for today. So this is quite a key one for us. This is the policy review. So if I can just start. Something has clearly gone wrong with home to school transport. The new policy is failing families, schools and communities across North Yorkshire. Most of you already know this firsthand. You've seen it in your inboxes, in stage 2 appeals and in the local press. 15 months on, it's clear that changing school transport eligibility has proved to be a linchpin decision of this council, and one that's set to define it and shape the future of our rural schools and communities. What looked manageable on paper has fallen flat in the real world, creating chaos, stress and hardship. When this policy was passed in July 24, members were promised safeguards, a post-implementation evaluation, a policy review starting this summer, and a working group to oversee the process. None of them have happened. The evaluation was dropped, no working group was formed, and the review has been pushed back an entire year. If that's allowed to happen, nothing is going to change until September 28 at the very earliest. Officer are about to argue today that the delay is to allow for a full year of data, but the picture is already clear. You have the data. We know how many children have qualified for free transport, how many bus passes are sold, what routes are being travelled, and what vehicles have been commissioned. You have everything you need to project forward and get a clear fiscal picture, exactly as was intended when a 2025 review was promised to you by the officers in this room ahead of last year's vote.
Sorry, your microphone has gone off. Can you put?
Is that okay? Can we really afford 3 more years of this mess? Families left in limbo, schools destabilises, resources wasted, and trust draining away by the day. And does anybody here really want this to be the backdrop for the 2027 elections? On behalf of the 888 members of the School Transport Action Group, we're asking you to act now. Please start the review this year so that the conclusions can actually be made and recommendations put in place for September 27. Make it comprehensive, make it transparent and independent. The officers cannot be allowed to mark their own homework after everything that's happened. And how, we would say, please vote today to form a working group to oversee and deliver a review that the public can believe in. An accident of timing means that this committee was sidestepped last July. You didn't get the chance to scrutinise the policy then, and this policy review is your chance to put some of that right. Please use the power you have. Ensure this review starts now and that it has proper teeth. Parents, schools, and above all, children are depending on you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. Sorry, thank you, Amanda. So item number 6, briefing on the home.
Do the officer response?
Sorry, I beg your pardon, Amanda. Yeah, your response, please.
Thank you for your statement, and the views on the policy are noted. The reason that the post-implementation review was agreed to take place in July 2026 are, as you have suggested, there are benefits to seeing the data associated with the 25-26 academic year, and this has been noted in the report that's presented in this meeting. The report also sets out the extent of the proposed content of the post-implementation review. However, to further your understanding, I can provide some additional details about the timing of the review. So whilst you're right that we know how many North Yorkshire children were offered places in which schools on National Offer Day in March and April this year, we always see significant movement between National Offer Days and the start of the new term in September. This year has been the same across both primary and secondary school places. And as councillors know, changes in admissions also result in changes in eligibility for homeschool transport. Whilst you're right in that we know how many children were eligible for travel when we assessed all admissions applications this summer, and whilst most appeals have been completed, the process is still underway, and so the learning from the appeals cannot yet be comprehensively evaluated. Passes have been sold on several contracted routes, but requests are still coming in and payments for these have not yet been taken. Consequently, the focus of those involved in the transport team in recent weeks has been on ensuring that arrangements are in place for known eligible children for the start of this academic year. And for the reasons given above, each September and October, we see a settling of the transport network. And that's true this year too. Regardless of which policy is in place, many children move schools at this time of year. Eligibility can change, and this requires adjustments to services, especially over the first half of the autumn term. We know that the network usually settles after a couple of months, and so by November we can start to evaluate the operational costs of the new school year's arrangements. The work alone to do this is substantial, as we look at the costs of supporting eligibility under the 2019 policy alongside eligibility under the 2024 policy. National school census information is collected in October, January and May each year. These are the data points that will provide accurate pupil cohort information, allowing a more detailed analysis of cohorts, comparing this academic year, to the same points in the 2 previous years. This will allow us to assess changes over time in both admissions and transport, and understand what this means for North Yorkshire schools. The second set of admissions data during this academic year will allow us to identify any emerging patterns in admissions preferences and consider whether these could be connected to the homeschool travel policy. And finally, in November this year, as part of the routine contract procurement exercises, roughly 30% of all mainstream homeschool travel contracts are scheduled to be reviewed in time for changing in April 2026. The completion of this exercise will allow accurate information to be fed into the post-implementation review in July, so that a robust evaluation of the cost of the policy change going forward can be considered.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you, Amanda. Joe, do you have a supplementary question?
All of that begs the question, why did you promise it for July 25? And I just want to point out that promise was made in the equality impact assessment as a mitigation to the box that was ticked that said rural families would be the ones that would be disproportionately harmed. So to move that back a year is to calm for another year. And if things settle in September, October, can we start it on November the 1st?
Okay, so I can explain around the equalities impact assessment. So that's part of the decision-making process, and that document that you're talking about was written prior to the report that went to executive on the 16th of July last year. Between the executive meeting where the policy was proposed and taken to full council on the 24th of July, the PIR was spoken about, and during the meeting in July, the full council meeting, it was proposed for July 26 and has consistently been referred to as July 26 since July 24. So that was superseded at the time that the policy decision has been made, and those dates have not been referred to since. So I think that's the answer. The second part of the question, sorry, was around, can we start the post-implementation review earlier? I think I've explained in the answers that we require data at different points during the year. So whilst we'll start to gather and analyse it, we can't fully do that until after the turn of the financial year and the end of the academic year, which is July 26, as I've already explained.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you. So we move on to item. Oh, beg your pardon. Sorry, I'm all over the place today. I've got other things on my mind. Mr. Shepherd, I beg your pardon. Would you like to come forward?
Okay. Good morning. My wife and I adopted 2 children in 2010. After gradually escalating violence and criminality from my son, start again.
Did you hear that, Chair?
Should I start again? Forgive me, the mic. Okay. My wife and I adopted 2 children in 2010. After gradually escalating violence and criminality from my son to the point where we were living for years in an essentially abusive household, in 2023, we were obliged to disrupt our adoption of him, age 15. Between the time that our adoption of him became fundamentally untenable and the time he was accommodated, my wife and I were badly treated by the very agents that should have been supporting us at that time, but also for the preceding years. Our extended family were emotionally blackmailed, and allusions were made to the consequences for my wife's employment should child protection arrangements be deemed necessary. Threats were made that our other child may be removed. Once our son was accommodated in the clumsiest, most traumatic way, I wondered why we all should have been treated in this way. And thus I requested to see the council procedures or guidelines that covered adoption family breakdown so that I could determine whether I'd been badly treated as a result of missteps by individual social workers or because of institutional systems that were operating exactly as intended by their architects. Essentially, I wanted to know if there existed a council document that read, Step 1, threaten the parents with prosecution for child abandonment. My multiple requests were dismissed. I conversed at length with my MP. His requests on my behalf were likewise dismissed more than once. These dismissals made me realise that either this council has procedures of which it is ashamed, or this council is ashamed of lacking procedures in this area and is reluctant to admit it, or the council simply resents the prying. The council simply resents the prying of a mere voter into the mechanisms by which it conducts itself, or of an MP, indeed. I conclude by requesting in person that the committee shares with me the written guidelines or procedures governing family breakdown according to which I was treated and others remain governed, or admits to their absence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. I actually have a statement here from the Assistant Director for Children and Families, Mel Hutchinson, which I will read out. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, Mel. I was told I was reading this out. You're here. Please read. I'm making all sorts of mistakes.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd, for sharing your views and your difficult family circumstances with us. Children's Services can confirm that all procedures are followed in line with statutory regulation under the Children Act 1989 and the Adoption and Children Act 2002. The Children Act 1989 sets out the framework for the support of children in need, and this is underpinned by the Children and Families Assessment. The Adoption and Children Act is a principal legislation that includes provision and support for the welfare of children who require adoption support post the adoption order granted by the court. Children's Services practice model is strength-based in relationships and looks to working with the families and their family network to support and offer assistance to progress change where able. For those families who are unable to care for their children, either by ensuring safety or maintaining the child living at the home, those children are placed into the local authority care under the Children Act 1989. This can be either through by the means of a Section 31 order, care order, or a Section 20 order, which is a voluntary agreement with those parents. Children can also receive Section 17 support and accommodation when they reach 16 years old. A homeless assessment is undertaken and consideration given to Section 17 services or Section 20 of the Children Act. North Yorkshire has clearly outlined these processes and regulations within previous communication. North Yorkshire, like other local authorities within the Regional Adoption Agency, does not have a separate policy on family breakdowns, which occur after the making of an adoption order. All families, regardless of whether the young person was adopted or not, fall under the same legislation of the Children Act 1989. As the child is legally adopted and part of their adoptive family, the process is followed is that of family breakdown, which is overseen by Children's Services, Children and Family Assessment and Support Team, and it's a Children and Families assessment that is undertaken. And this is in consultation with the adoption services that have supported families throughout that time. The Adoption and Children Act 2002 and Adoption Agency Regulations in 2005 state where a child who has been placed for adoption prior to the making of an adoption order, if this placement was to end, a disruption meeting would be undertaken. This meeting is to understand the reasons for the disruption. Whilst this was not the policy and regulation required following your son not being able to remain in your care, we can confirm that myself, the Assistant Director and the Head of Services met with Mrs Shepherd and other parents to listen and understand individual circumstances. It is important that we undertake and listen to families when situations occur like this. We are confident that all policies and procedures were followed and complaints received have been fully investigated.
Thank you, Mel. Mr. Shepherd, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes. Are social workers encouraged to threaten prosecution for child abandonment?
No, they're not. No, we work with families. We explain all the remits and legislation so that families understand the situation and the processes that we have to follow.
It happens.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shepherd. That's your time. Thank you for attending today. Okay. Okay. Members of the public can remain here at the meeting if you wish, or you can leave now. It's up to yourselves. I take it that you're going to stay. Okay, thank you. So I'll try and get it right from now on. So item number 6, the briefing on the home to school transport policy post implementation review. So please note that Councillor Peacock has left the room. Amanda, would you like to come in? Just before Amanda begins, can I remind members here that it must be noted that the purpose of the PIR is to review the implementation of the 2024 policy and not the policy itself. So during discussion, please bear that in mind. Apparently there are 6 defined sections of the PIR. So over to you, Amanda.
Thank you. So hopefully councillors have seen the report and can see in there, just as the chair has outlined, that the report provides an outline of the structure of the post-implementation review and some of the descriptions about what might go into the 6 sections of that post-implementation review. And we invite comments from the Scrutiny Committee about those proposals. The background to the review is obviously the policy that was adopted in July 2024. At the point of that policy being adopted, a post-implementation review was offered during the decision-making process, and it was determined that it would take place in July 2026 after the impact of the policy can be seen on the 25-26 schools academic year. There's no duty on the council to undertake a formal post-implementation review, but the council does do this for other areas of its work, and so it was felt that it would be appropriate after this change of policy. Officers involved in the policy review goes beyond the Children and Young People Service, and it involves colleagues in finance, integrated passenger transport services, admissions, inclusion, transformation, legal and democratic services, and business support. The final report of the post-implementation review will be taken to the Executive Committee with any recommendations to that committee, and on the way to that committee it will come back to Children's Overview and Scrutiny Committee at this meeting at this time next year.
Thank you, Amanda. Right, any questions? Councillor Timothy.
Before I get to my questions, I'd just like to offer my apologies for my lateness today. I have a couple of questions. First of all, to what in item 3.4, and you know, it's just been discussed now, there's a list of teams within the council who will feed into this review. I was curious to ask, what extent will those teams sort of inform each other?
So different teams hold access to different information. Currently, the information in order to carry out the review is held across a number of digital systems and by a number of different people. So I can take each one in turn and just describe that to you if that's helpful. Yeah, okay. So finance colleagues obviously have full sight of the finance implications. They'll get some of that information from the Integrated Passenger Transport Team, IPT, who are responsible for commissioning the transport, ensuring any variations to contracts take place, and that's for mainstream and SEND, and 2 separate sort of arrangements. They'll feed that information on a monthly basis to finance, who can then undertake analysis. However, the information that they hold is limited in terms of the data around the pupils. So the admissions and transport team, supported by business support services, hold the information that comes through the school census about who the children are, where they live, are they eligible for free school meals, and so on. And so what we need to do is bring 2 lots of data together and undertake some matching exercise to make sure that we understand both the pupils that are eligible for transport, which information will be held in the transport team, and those that are not, because obviously to understand the impact of the policy, we've got to look at the cohort that have not been eligible this year. So that's held by the admissions and transport team, who also undertake the eligibility work and are responsible for the policy in that respect. The inclusion team hold the SENS transport information, where they analyse which children are eligible for transport under the SEN criteria. The transformation colleagues have worked with us on for example, the digital tool and the distance calculator, and they bring together the different services to make sure information is brought together to take the review. Legal and democratic services, obviously, as Daniel responded earlier, oversee the appeals part of the process. So we'll want that analysis that comes from them. So at the moment, information is held in lots of different places as part of normal business. And the need for us to work together, as we have done in the development of the policy and the direct implementation of it to now, is to do that analysis with information across different services.
Thank you. Councillor Basterman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just regarding the timeline, if I may, through you, Chair, address Amanda, on page 28. I just find it inconceivable that it's going to take so long to bring it to a decision. When you think, here we are in September now, it's spring 26, the members' seminar. And, with respect in support of what was said earlier, it just seems an awful long time to be dragging it out like this, to take it to September 27.
Are you looking at the table at 11.3? Apologies, I don't
Yes,
think the page numbers.
yeah, sorry, Amanda.
Yes. So I think I explained in the response earlier that we need to take data points at different times of year, and in the answer I've just provided then explained that it is held in different places. So there isn't one system at the moment that would allow us to press a few buttons and run a report to say who are all the children in the county and which ones are eligible for transport and how much does that cost. So there's a number of data sets that need to come together and be analysed. Because we change a lot of the contracts in September and October each year as it settles down, the payments are made to contractors in arrears. So we won't see the payments come through for this academic year, the first round until November. We'll then take that payment information and need to analyse it against over 700 different contracts that have got 10, 11, 12,000 children on them. Some of those children will have eligibility under the old policy and some under the new policy. So to enable us to give a real commentary on what the cost of the policy change is, because that's what the implementation review will report on, then we need to break all of that information down and undertake a robust analysis.
Thank you, Amanda. And I accept and acknowledge it isn't press one button and it gives you the answer, every answer you want to hear. But I still am concerned at the length of time that it's taking and the pressure and concerns and upset that it's causing families about things as well. But I've said my piece and you've answered it. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
The only other point I'll just add is that the May census data is the more comprehensive census return that we get, and that's the one that we used in May 23 to first look at the transport potential changes to the policy, and then in May 24 that's the data that we used when we did the modelling for the decision in July 24. So it would be really helpful to look at the same point in time each year and make meaningful comparisons.
Before I come to you, Councillor Lunn, I would just like to ask a question because it's relating to the timeline. Given that we will have elections in May 2027 and the council will go into purdah in March, how will that impact on the timeline that you've outlined?
So if you're talking about March 2027 in that, then the executive committee will have had any recommendations in October, November before that. The council will, if there's recommendations for a policy change as a result of the PIR, then work will need to be done after the executive meeting and before spring 27 because a consultation would be needed. With the timeline we used at the previous policy change, the consultation took place in February to April. So it could be a similar period. It needs to be a 6 weeks window. We'd obviously know ahead of time when that purdah period would be, and we'd make sure the consultation took place before. Officers will still be working, although not putting anything in public that could interfere with any election process if there's a purdah period, and that's the same as normal business. We have a number of decisions that come through that we wouldn't put out, that would be against that guidance.
Thank you, but this is a scrutiny committee, and I note that I think there's only 2 points in your timeline that it will come back to this committee, and I strongly feel that it should come more often. I think it should come back at least another 2 times to this committee to be scrutinised. Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Chair. It's more of a statement. I do look forward to the financial analysis of this coming forward to my audit committee in the fullness of time. Do you have any idea of the date when we could get such a report?
Yeah, I think it would probably be at a similar time. So when it comes through to scrutiny committee, I think in September 26 we'll look to put a slot on at audit committee at the same time. Okay.
Councillor Duckett.
Thank you, Chair. It's under sort of section 3 where I'm coming in. Can't let today go by without flagging up 2 of the main problems that we've had coming to us repeatedly at appeals. We've proved that the council did inform schools. The failure was the schools have not passed that on. That's not only our own schools, I'm talking about neighbouring authorities as well. Now, this obviously is, it's been a massive problem. Can we please make sure that in future, letters are sent before parents start choosing where they're going to send their children to all Year 6 pupils? It should be flagged, a standard letter go out, flagged to schools that they must send that out to the parents, so we can right at the start say, emphasise, you must look at this policy. It has changed. Please look at it. And the other one is, can we have a rolling programme every year of contacting school and say, have you put any new gates into your premises? Because that is another one that is repeatedly coming up. Thank you.
So I can respond to that. As you rightly said, last year we did send out the information to schools to pass on to the Year 6 parents, as we do every year. This year we put that in a dedicated bulletin rather than within the bulletin, which some people have cited that as a reason that schools might not have seen it. So we put a dedicated one that's already gone out because the admissions window opened last Friday. We have been really explicit that we want the schools to share this with the families. We've provided a new set of slides that they can use for their open evenings, which are happening at the moment in schools, where we've reminded them again about the policy. We've also, on the application form that families will fill in this year, without doing sort of red flashing lights, we've made it really clear that people need to refer to the current policy. We have put a checkbox in before they sign to say that they are submitting their admissions application, that they've read and understood the policy. So we've put some extra layers in. They were there, but I think they probably weren't so explicit. But this year we have taken some of that feedback and obviously done that. And then I think there was a second point about the gates. Yeah, so we're currently developing a process where we are going to be contacting all of the schools and making sure that if they make any changes, they do inform us about them, so that the council's mapping system can reflect that.
I have another question as well. It's with regards to, I'm assuming this is an internal review, and given the amount of comments that we have received in our inboxes and also had today about the feelings of parents that they've not been listened to, my question is, do you feel that an internal review is credible? I understand you will probably respond by saying it is efficient and cost effective. That's a given response, but could we not at least have some independent oversight of this review?
I think the paper proposes what officers feel is the scope for the review, and we feel that that's comprehensive. It includes services from across the council that are working as part of the homeschool travel policy implementation. In terms of independent oversight, I think that would need to be decided elsewhere. I don't know, Stuart, if you want to add anything to that.
Yes, thank you. No, as officers, we wouldn't recommend an independent review. It would set a precedent around, well, where would you stop with the council of any decision being taken that may be viewed as being non-independent? I just think we open a precedent of nightmare for any decision making in the council. And you have to remember, you know, fundamentally, policy decisions are political. They are taken by politicians and they are not independent. They are done by the council in a structured, legal and democratic way. So I just think a precedent of something that is described as independent, taking a view of that would be a difficult one for the council to adopt, but I'm sure could be of more debate from a legal and democratic point of view.
Thank you, Stuart. Councillor Slater.
Sorry, just in response to what Stuart's just said, I thought that this review was about the process, not specifically about the policy. Yeah. I accept that the policy was set by politicians, but the policy was implemented by officers.
Again, there's no legal requirement for a post-implementation review. It's something that's undertaken as good practice and is undertaken by officers. And I don't see any requirement or need to deviate from that. So it certainly wouldn't be a recommendation of officers that we do that. But like all things, that's open to councillors to decide how they want to proceed.
Councillor Goodrick.
I think it's right that we review the policy, but I'm not sure we need an independent review because we have an overview and scrutiny committee for that with all the members that are here. That's our job, to scrutinise the decision-making process. So I would say that if there was any scrutiny to be done, it should be done by us, the elected representatives, not an outside body. Thank you, Chair.
Then perhaps you'll support my proposal that we have more opportunities for the scrutiny committee to actually scrutinise this policy, as I suggested earlier on, was backed by Councillor Basterman. If perhaps Amanda could actually look at the timeline and include that in it, I'd be grateful. Councillor Poskett, did you indicate you want to speak? Would it be, you made a proposal earlier on, it may be pertinent perhaps to discuss that now, that proposal, as it does pertain to this this particular item.
Yeah, happy to follow your advice on that. Thank you. So before I make the proposal, I would like to say that irrespective of how we as councillors voted for the first or second time on this policy, it's very clear that the impact on families and young people in our county has been significant. And I don't think any of us were aware of the reality of the disruption and upset this policy change would have until it played out in front of us. I fully appreciate why the policy change came about and what savings the council hoped to make. But our role here on this committee is to act in the very best interests of young people across North Yorkshire. I have a list here in front of me of members who have actively supported these families with their appeals or by sending letters to help with their cases. I have emails from head teachers and academy leads pleading for us to look at how this is going to affect them in the years to come. I believe that by setting up a working group including key stakeholders and councillors across the parties will help paint a full picture of what is happening beyond the council chamber. When we know better, I believe we can do better. So the proposal, I'm happy to read the proposal if you would like, or I think all members have had it, but the basic proposal is to establish a working group, if it will pop up, establish a politically balanced working group on homeschool transport policy review to ensure transparency, fairness and public confidence in the review of the homeschool transport policy. I propose that politically balanced working group be established under the oversight of this scrutiny committee.
Thank you. Councillor Basterman.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarification then, and I look to Daniel Harry here and not Amanda, it isn't within the remit of this committee to agreed to this, is it? Surely it should go to the Constitutional Working Group and then the Executive and then Council for approval to set up such a working group. Is that correct, Daniel?
So a overview and scrutiny committee can set up a working group. That's absolutely fine. In the normal course of events, a working group would be set up where the committee had done an extended piece of work on a complex area of policy development, demand management, supply management, whatever else it may be, that falls within their remit. And then it's determined you need a working group to actually release the capacity, as it were, to go ahead and then bring something back to the committee. So yes, you can. In the normal course of the things, it would organically emerge, but you can put forward a motion for members of this committee to consider today. So the normal course of things, you would propose, you would second, debate, and then potentially vote on the motion as to whether a working group should be set up. In terms of the role and remit of the working group, again, the committee would need to agree the terms of reference. And it would also be helpful if in doing so that the committee consult with officers, because potentially this has significant implications for officer time and resources, because you would effectively be running 2 reviews in parallel. Clearly, the one that's being discussed today will run its course, and then you are suggesting a secondary one to run alongside. What would then happen is once you'd finished your deliberations as a working group, they would need to come back to the committee to be debated and a decision made whether they're accepted by the committee. In terms of that, you can have a majority report and a minority report emerging from a working group. They would then need to go to the executive and then potentially on to full council. So it is a long, laborious process, but you can opt to do this. Clearly, if the review is about the policy, then it will need to go to full council because the policy is on the council's policy framework and it's only full council that can make that decision. But you would make recommendations to the executive to consider, who in turn would make recommendations to full council. Clearly as well, the policy cannot be reconsidered by full council until after May 2026 because it was previously considered at the extraordinary meeting of council in May 2025. But it's largely within your hands. But what I would say, I'd sort of re-emphasise that you will end up, if you go down this route, you'll have 2 reviews going in tandem, which will put considerable strain upon council resources.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yes, thank you. Complete agreement and understand that. The only other thing I would add is the policy has changed and it's been voted on twice, and any recommendations, I would expect the financial elements to be well understood with plans about how that would financially be met, because the cost of, say, reversing the policy would be far more expensive now because we've already implemented the policy. So there are huge financial considerations that it would be expected to be considered alongside that. And I would be worried about the officer time, because this is in addition to the post-implementation review, and we've just outlined the huge amount of work that needs to be undertaken by officers still to undertake that work.
Thank you. Councillor Poskett, would you like to respond to that, perhaps explaining in greater detail what you feel that the purpose of this group is?
I fully understand. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Stuart. I fully understand the points made. I wouldn't want to put extra pressure on officer time. I know this is a really challenging issue. I just think there are huge lessons to be learned here. And I think when we vote on policies, when things are in black and white and they're there in front of us, it's very difficult to understand the full fallout of that until we see that playing out in front of us. I voted a certain way both times, and it's not until this policy has come in that it's the enormity has been kind of experienced. So I just think as a scrutiny committee, there are real lessons to be learned and facts to be gathered and experiences to be shared. So, but, I appreciate the legal advice on that.
Well, that's a proposal from Councillor Poskett. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Slater. We have a seconder. Sorry, any other comments before we go to the vote on this? Thank you, Councillor Paraskos.
Oh, I think, Councillor, are you sure? Well, mine's just a single point, really. And it's back to what you said about this committee being actually, the group should be looking at this. And I'm not sure we need a working group that will have to come back to us to report to us, and we'll have to sit and discuss that, and it'll just extend the whole process. So I shan't be supporting it, unfortunately.
Councillor Goodrick.
Thank you, Chair. I don't disagree that there are issues, but actually, in order to progress, I do think that we need to have the results, the information from a post-implementation review, because without that information, we are not basing anything that we do on facts, because we simply don't have all the facts. I think we've also got to appreciate that we place over 12,500 children into education this year, and they are all to be gone through with regard to travel and routing, etc. So I think there is a process to follow, and I think the first step in the process is to do the PIR, and then we have to look at the policy. And if the policy needs to be looked at to be changed, then we do that. I think there is a way of getting there, and I think we're just a bit premature with suggesting a working group now until we've got all the information. Sorry, I can't support that first.
Councillor Baston.
Yeah, Chairman, just a point of clarification, thanks, from what Daniel said and Stuart said, from a staffing point of view and everything else, and there's a real risk then of maybe pushing this September 27 date even further back. And that's the concerns that I had 5, 10, 15 minutes ago. So, you know, in this instance, I'm sorry, Kirsty, I can't support it because it's running a risk of pushing that back further. Thanks.
Proposed, it's been seconded. Can we go to the vote then? The proposal to set up a working group on the home to school transport policy review. All those in favour? Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry, any abstentions? Sorry, the proposal fails, I'm afraid. Thank you. Sorry. Yes, John, Councillor Ritchie.
Have I missed the opportunity to comment on the appeals process itself? Can I do that? Is that okay?
Yes, you can.
So if we're, I've said I'm a member of the appeals committee, albeit I haven't sat as yet on any appeals. What I am a fairly experienced companion at various tribunals and appeals, whether they be employment or disciplinary appeals. I realise these are different circumstances, but it would normally, at appeals that I'm familiar with, the accompanying person could, if they wanted to, present the case on behalf of the person they're accompanying. Is that not the case then? So couldn't someone who's accompanying a parent present the case on their behalf? And is it right that we're now just restricted to making a statement at the end of the presentation?
So in terms of the appeals, and again, this goes for a number of different appeals processes at the council. Someone can bring, an appellant can bring with them a supporter. So our guidance clearly sets out this could be a friend or colleague. They're largely there for emotional support because we recognise as a council an appeals process, most people won't have been through an appeals process in their life. It will be quite formal, intimidating potentially. So they can bring a supporter largely for that emotional support. However, if they want to make a statement, they can do because of their knowledge of the appellant. And equally, they can ask any questions or points of clarification through the appellant. Equally, if an appellant is unable to actively engage in the meeting, and it could be because of a disability, loss of confidence, a language barrier, then they can actually be represented in that case by a supporter. But overall, it's the case of if you want to bring someone with you, you can. They can make a statement, but all we're asking is any questions go through the appellant, because the focus is on the appellant and for the stage 2 appeal, whether the homeschool transport policy has been applied correctly, and then whether there's any exceptional individual circumstances that flow from that. So my contention would be there is no restriction. People are still able to support the appellant as they have done and in line with our guidance and DfE guidance.
But they couldn't present the case on behalf of the appellant.
They can, where an appellant is not able to do so freely themselves, for whatever reason it may be. But the appellant cannot simply choose to be advocated, to have an advocate on their behalf. Again, it's very much about you are the appellant, talk to the committee about your exceptional circumstances. Because again, the committee meetings where the appeals are heard are not meant to be confrontational. They're very much about trying to draw out from someone, well, you've said you've got exceptional circumstances, talk to us as the committee about them. Tell us about them. So that's why the focus is very much upon the appellant.
It's just that I know of many cases where the appellant is so lacking in confidence that they're so apprehensive, and I completely appreciate this is not meant to be a confrontational process, but often it will be seen that way by an appellant. It's them against it's us against them, although we try and avoid that situation. I appreciate what you said. Thank you.
Sorry, can I follow on from that? Because I have participated in a number of appeals where we have had parents who perhaps are normally articulate, but because of the emotional aspect of appearing before a panel, although we try and make it as comfortable as possible, I think sometimes they do feel they are before a judge and a jury. How can we, from what you've said, you know, if they don't feel able to articulate at that meeting, therefore their supporter can speak on their behalf? I'm assuming from what you've just said that is the case. And if so, how can we judge the criteria? Do we have any criteria to say, well, this person can represent themselves, or no, this person can't, and therefore needs their supporter to speak for them? It's a very fine line.
It is a fine line, absolutely. So again, I'd reiterate that the what is currently in place is that an appellant can bring a supporter with them. That's largely around emotional support. If they want to make a statement in support of the case of the appellant, because usually they'll know them quite well because they'll be a friend or colleague or occasionally a counsellor, then they can do so and they can direct any questions through the appellant. Clearly, some people will find an appeal stressful, in which cases, as you will know from sitting on the appeals panel, Councillor Brodigan, the appeal can be adjourned. The individual can take time to leave the room, have a cup of coffee, sit down, reconsider before coming back into the room. But again, you know, what we are not in a position of doing is having advocates for individuals. It is an appellant who's bringing their case and being encouraged by the committee, which is an independent panel of members, to be able to consider, again, those exceptional individual circumstances. So they will work with the people before them to try and draw out from them what's going on. And certainly from recollection, most appeals will be every bit of an hour, if not longer, which gives people ample opportunity to talk through their case. And again, I'd go back to comments I made earlier, which is this is a stage 2 process. The appellants have already been through a stage 1 process and their appeal not upheld. So the onus is very much upon them to demonstrate at stage 1, I think you missed X, therefore I'm presenting it here today. Thank you.
Councillor Basterman.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just following on from Councillor Ritchie and yourself, I think it's only fair, right and proper that we identify that when the appellant come in with supporters or not, they are encouraged by the Chair and members of that appeals committee to be relaxed. It is not confrontational, to be relaxed, to take time, compose themselves if they do feel faltering in any way. But the most important thing is, at the end of that meeting, the Chair always gives the last word to the appellant to make sure that they leave that room fully satisfied that they've got their point over, they've tried to identify extenuating circumstances that proves against the policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Basterman. I understand the point you're making, and the Chair does indeed try to relax, but we can't speak for the appellant. We can't speak for how they feel. You know, we do try, but that is not always the case. Oh, excellent. There you go, Councillor Duckett. So hopefully that's clarified it a bit for Councillor Ritchie. Thank you. Any other questions? No. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Okay, because this is coming to item number 7, Chair's remarks. I need to go and get Councillor Peacock back. And that gives time for people to, members of the public, a short break, comfort break.
Sorry, apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. The next item on the agenda is number 7, Chair's remarks. Given that we've got a very busy agenda today, rather than actually go through my statement, I'll include it in the minutes, and then if members have any questions that they want to raise, we can do that at the next meeting, if everybody's okay with that. Which would take us then on to item number 8, progress on the issue raised by the committee. What should I say? Right, this is with regards to the neurodiverse member championship champion item. We have decided to actually, or I have decided to move that to the mid-cycle briefing in November for discussion then. So hopefully you're all in accordance with that. Thank you. So we go to item number 9, the performance monitoring data being presented by Chris Watson. Thank you, Chris, who's the corporate strategy and performance lead. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I'm here to introduce the performance report. This is a new agenda item that we're bringing. We're proposing to bring it every 6 months or so. What I brought is a kind of condensed view of the corporate Q1 performance report. This are the elements focusing exclusively on children and young people services. The broader quarter report goes to management board, scrutiny board, and executive. The report is as set out, and I'm happy to invite questions on the content of the report.
Councillor Timothy.
Thank you, Chair. I did have one question about this report. Regards the section about permanent exclusions from primary schools in this instance, I did notice there was a lot of the use of the phrase sort of schools choosing to permanently exclude. And I was just wanted to ask for a little bit. I just wanted to ask for a little bit of clarification on is there a fixed North Yorkshire Council policy on how schools are allowed to permanently exclude, or is it, you know, do academy trusts have their own policy? Where does that?
Is Amanda going to respond?
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of exclusions, the only person that can undertake an exclusion is the head teacher of the school. So it's part of their responsibilities. Usually exclusions are part of the school's behaviour policy, although it might be called different things. So it's one in a number of stages or options that schools can use to manage behaviour in school and obviously address any issues. There are certain criteria that need to be met for exclusions, and there are a number of processes that do allow scrutiny of that decision, but ultimately the decision and therefore the choice sits with the head teacher of each school.
Thank you.
Councillor Goodrick.
Sorry, Amanda, you've probably moved away, and I'm gonna ask another question, because like Councillor Timothy, I'm always concerned about exclusions of children, because the best place for them to be is in school learning, and it always really worries me when we have exclusions. Now, I know there are not many. What I'd like to clarify is, does the local authority have any influence when it comes to those exclusion orders that the head might make? And if they are excluded from school, are they put onto the virtual school so that they don't miss out on a huge amount of schooling? I just need some clarification. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you. So we do get notified of all exclusions in primary and secondary schools, and at that point, as I say, a process starts. And part of that is from the local authority's perspective is that we put together something called a statement of case. So we prepare a statement that explains any support that the child might have had, if they've got additional needs, what adjustments might have been expected and so on. So we do offer that back. As a result of that, for the first time in the academic year just finished, we've had, I think, 5 exclusions overturned. So governors rescinded the decision of the head and the pupil typically remained in school. Where the child is excluded or the young person is excluded from school, then we have a duty, which we often refer to as 6-day provision. So that 6 days after the child's been away from education because of an exclusion, then we're required to put some provision in place. Typically, that's through the pupil referral units or alternative provision academies. And because we've seen an increase in the need for that for primary children, we have got separately a consultation that's going to be underway around putting in extra provision for primary to make sure we meet that duty with the rising numbers.
Can I ask you to stay there a moment, Amanda, because there might be more questions. It's like musical chairs today. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. It'll be no surprise what I'm going to ask on elective home education. As you know, Chair, I'm very concerned from the child's point of view about the danger of them lacking an education moving forward. Have we got any data about the number of children that come back into the system having previously been elected for home education? So, you know, for whatever reasons the parents feel that they need to get them back into school. I wonder if moving forward if we could look at that, because of course then there has been a disruption to that child's education and they may not achieve what they would have achieved if they'd remained in formal education.
Yeah, we do track kind of where they re-enroll into school. So we do have that information. We can bring that back.
Councillor Slater.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from Councillor Baker's point, really, in cases where children have perhaps been home educated for a variety of different reasons for a number of years and are then post 16 and wish to re-enter standard education, what are we doing to ensure that they can get places and get the support that they need when it may be their own decision at this point of how they want to be educated?
Thank you. So whether pre or post 16, if children return from EHE, which we have seen a rising number, then the level of support from the local authority does vary for pre and post 16. So just to go back to the earlier question, we have seen more and more children come back into EHE, and we've seen the total number of days that students are typically elective home educate reduced by half. So it used to be around 750 days. It's now around 300 as an average and often a lot lower. So where they come back in at post 16, to answer your question, because the admissions arrangement for post 16 don't involve the local authority leading on a process, an application would have to be made to each school or college, and they would have the oversight on what academic requirements might be needed for the course or programme of study that the young person wants to undertake. So we can signpost to what courses are available or what schools have sixth forms, for example, and colleges. But the onus is on, as it is for all post 16, is on the young person and the family to go and seek that out. Where there's an education, health and care plan in place, obviously there is a role for the LA, and that's the same as it is for all children.
Councillor.
So if you go back in time, there used to be a national service called, this is where my age gets away from me, you see, called Connections. And their role was to understand the career and education aspects of all children, and they would have been able to go and find that connection service and access it. That was removed from local authorities, defunded, and responsibilities put elsewhere. So we can't replicate that anymore. The other point I would make is there is absolutely no national research at all into the benefits or otherwise, or the destinations or long-term effects of elective home education. There's none whatsoever. So it's really hard to A, know, B, judge and understand this cohort of children. And it's something I would nationally like to see some proper understanding and research into short and long-term impacts of elective home education. But again, not in the gift of us as a local authority to resolve.
I know it's your particular bugbear, isn't it, home education?
It is, and I continue to agitate about it. We are trying to look to get off the ground some national research in some of this, but whether it happens or not, who knows?
Thank you. Councillor Baker, yeah. Councillor Baker, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah. Two things. So Stuart, perhaps that's what you should do when you leave these hallowed halls. Go and do some research on home education. No, coming back, you said something about the number of days. So am I led to believe that the number of days that parents have now withdrawn their children for is less than it used to be? So they're only withdrawing them for a short amount of time, and then they're putting them back into the system.
Yes. So the data I'm looking at is up to June last year, this last academic year, but this calendar year. And what we saw is for EHE referrals that have ceased to be EHE and come back into school. Previously, there were 750 days in 21-22 was a typical time. So that's several school years that's impacting. At the point when this data was taken last June, it was 300-ish days, and that was the same as the year before. So the last 2 years have been around 300 days as the average amount of time out of schools for children that have come back in. So they're going out for a shorter length of time. Part of that figure, though, will be because 60% of children that we have as EHE, so 60% of our 1,500 children are in year 10 and 11. So if they become EHE in those last 2 years of secondary school, clearly the number of days will be less. So there's two things at play here. One is that more children are coming back into education after EHE. The other is that an older cohort of children are becoming EHE, and therefore they're being it for less time, because you stop counting EHE once they get to the summer of year 11.
Because their education was impacted by the COVID, and therefore were in years 9 and 10 from the COVID, and that would have an impact as well.
I don't think this data alone could show that. No, I'm not sure that conclusion can be made.
It would be interesting if there continued to be a drop in the number of days that they're out. Thank you.
Fools, I believe you have a question.
Yes, the question on paragraph 3.4, Madam Chairman. Concerned to see the increase in number of primary school permanent exclusions. What are we trying to do to alleviate this problem? Is it something that this committee can instigate, or is it communities as a whole, schools? Because it's a worrying trend. Because if we don't tackle the problem when the youngsters are in primary school, there must be a real danger of it escalating into secondary education, when the problem will probably be much more serious. Talk about primary school education, youngsters who are in very formative years, and I think it is something that we really do need to address. I'm sure our officers have got it on board, but I wonder whether there's anything that we can do as councils to help resolve this problem.
So Stuart, would you like to respond?
It's okay, please. That's okay. First of all, I quite like this format, having my ADs here to answer the questions rather than me. So that's quite nice. We don't get that luxury in executive, so it makes a change, this one. I'll let Amanda answer what we're doing about it. But what I'd first say, even though the numbers have increased, they're really small. So if you look at permanent exclusions of children. It was, I think, 26 in the last year. We have 250, 300 primary schools. So the issue becomes one of what heads will always say to us, it's always the last resort. We do it once in a blue moon. It's just a few more are doing it. But I say once in every 2 blue moons then, please. So the numbers remain small. It is a small proportion of our primary schools. So the issue is it's then often different primary schools. So the tackling of how do we help primary schools become more inclusive and not repeat it changes each year. But there is work we're undertaking now. We do have an educational psychology service. Again, we are undertaking some inclusion work this year around identifying some of the primary schools we can work with to try and leave a legacy and then stretch that out into other schools. But Amanda might be able to talk more about that.
There's mixed news in the issue around primary exclusion. So whilst the overall number went down by a very small amount, the number of schools using exclusion went up. So as Stuart said, last year there were 20, previous academic year, there were 25 exclusions across 15 schools. So some were excluded more than once. This year it was 23 across 20 schools. So it was often one child in a school. So what we are doing though is we've looked at all the primary schools that have excluded over the last 3 years, and some of them that's been more than once over the last 3 years, and we're bringing them together. We're developing something at the moment with the Educational Psychology Service where we're bringing those schools together to offer some support on what they might be able to do before a situation gets to the point where they'd consider an exclusion. So that's the sort of project piece of work. Separate to that, you may remember, I think it will come to this committee, the DBV programme, the Delivering Better Value programme, where we put together something called an inclusive practice framework that describes what support should be ordinarily available to all children with SEN in our schools, in mainstream schools. We've just last week had the updated Ofsted framework and toolkit out, so we're now updating that inclusive practice framework. We're putting it out to schools, hopefully during October, that will be ready to go out. And that will support schools to understand what they should be doing for all children. And hopefully, with that approach that really looks into children's needs, they might be able to proactively put measures in place that avoid us getting to exclusion or avoid them getting to exclusion. And if they do get to that point, then they will have almost checked and made sure they've done all of those other steps. So it should make it absolutely the last resort. Because what we are finding is that many children that have been excluded do have SEN of some type or another.
Goodrick, and then Councillor Peacock.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up, sorry, I feel like we're playing tennis, going backwards and forwards, forgive me. I wanted to pick up on what Councillor Baker said about elective home education. Now, there'll be a cohort of parents that are perfectly capable of home educating their children, and there'll be a cohort that are not so good at that. I know there's a paper coming out from government about elective, and one of the things in it will be elective home education. Do we know anything about that that might help us to establish a framework where we can say to parents, this is the framework for home education, this is what we expect of you? Because at the very least, a child that's electively home educated should come out with good maths and English. If that's not there, should we be electively home educating? Sorry, it is a pet thing for me.
Get this to work. There we go. Yes, we've talked about this quite a few times, haven't we? So the elective home education is currently a feature in the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, which is passing through Parliament currently. I think it's still in the House of Lords second stage at the minute, but the expectation is it will come through for and be finalised before the end of the year, I think that's still its timeline. It's difficult to say. So I think I came last time to Scrutiny and went through what was in there around elective home education and a few comments about what we'd like to see in there and some of the lobbying we've done around that. And this fundamentally comes down to will the new bill determine what a suitable education is for elective home education? I don't hold much hope for that, but I remain, we'll see what happens when it comes through, because it isn't determined. The bar is fairly low. It has given us additional powers and responsibilities for where children have been subject to child protection issues, but it's not looking at the general standard of quality of education any further. So it is a wait and see to see what comes into legislation, what's passed, and then what the regulations then become and change. And we'll be keeping a keen eye on that. And I hope it has something stronger around what would be suitable for children.
Thank you. Councillor Peacock.
Yes, well, I mean, there's a lot of very good things in the report of what is happening. But I just wanted to it's on 5 of whatever, the executive performance report. And I'm just sort of more or less looking at the number of admissions to children in care. And it's actually, as it said, it is less than before. Is there any reason why? And in general, is this should be heading towards good news rather than not, because you marked it as a red. So you are actually have got, I think it's 10 more. 10 may not sound a lot, but it's like anything. The less that we can see going into care would be a good thing. It's not something we're wanting to see. And I'm wondering what's your reasonings sort of behind whether, you know, it is less than that year. Are we going to have this trend that it could be less, or was it just like a one-off that it's come through as less?
Okay. So in terms of the numbers of children in care now, it has risen over the last year or so, and so it's probably what it is. It's greater now than it's probably been for a long time. That reflects the rising demand and complexity we're seeing in the system. And again, I've talked about the relative rise in child poverty across North Yorkshire going up fairly significantly. We always started from a low place. So even with that rise, our numbers remain lower than regional and national levels, but that's because we've had an effective practice model around that for some time. And mostly those rising numbers are in what we call connected and kinship. So children remaining within their own networks and families as they enter a care period. But we would always want them to be low, and we'd always want children to be within their own families and networks. So that remains a key focus, but it is representing that rising demand overall, that rising complexity and the rise in relative child poverty that we've seen across the county since the COVID.
Councillor Timothy.
Thank you, Chair. I want to ask a question about the youth justice section, if I may. So a couple of things contained within it, really. So I can see that our first time entrant rate for young people into the criminal justice system went up in the most recent year that we've got data for by quite a large proportion, although you know, we're dealing with only 3-digit numbers, which I suppose, you know, so, but I did notice it went up quite substantially. And oh, sorry, page 46 of our papers or page 12 of the report, but 46 of our papers. Yeah, and then the binary, the reoffending rate, you know, I welcome that it's gone down in 2023, which is the most recent year that we've got data for. But I do note that in almost all of the years that we have data points for, we are higher than the country as a whole, and the decrease sort of mirrors a decrease in the country as a whole. So I'm curious as to whether in North Yorkshire there is a specific factor that is influencing that, or if we could be doing more.
I'll cover both of these. So some of the youth justice data is a source of frustration because it's quite out of date and how they measure it is quite difficult, and they are changing it significantly over time. So the thing I'd say about the first time entrant rate is I know it's now dropped again. So from this quarter, it's now dropped again, but you have to put it in the context of where this came from. So 8 years ago, before we introduced our local panel system and working with the police of let's really avoid first time entrants, that was 5 or 6 times the rate. So it's got to be seen in the context of the national work of reducing this massively and significantly. But it's a partnership decision. It's not a local authority decision. So there is a very clear panel process where children with, I'll say offences, but what we're trying to not get to offences, go to a review panel made up of police and local authority colleagues. And the entire part of that is to try to avoid children coming into the criminal system, the criminal justice system to start with. So we keep a close eye on it. I know it's gone down again, but the rate is incredibly low compared to where it was 5 years ago. And we're competing in quite a fluid mark of it, but we're always looking to try and see how we reduce it further. But I did attend, because it was fluctuating and not right, I attended a panel not long ago, and you look at the decisions and think, well, on the whole, I think they're right. So you have to manage it around what's the appropriate decision. But in our heads, we want to keep it as low as we can. But I think it will change again over time, but it has come down slightly. The binary reoffending rate, you'll notice the data's from 23. So you're 2.5 years over date, and the cohort on this is so small. We do expect it to fluctuate. So you'll see in June 21, we were the lowest, and then we're the highest, and I expect it to fluctuate. I think after just seeing the latest data, it's come down again. So it does move a lot, but it's one we keep our eye on. I think some of the new measures that are looking to be implemented through the Youth Justice Board will probably be a bit of a better way of judging some of the service, and they'll get reported on in due course. I know that we've been looking at some of those through the board as well.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Poskett.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm going back a couple of points. Stuart and Amanda actually have answered, but I just wanted to just double check. In terms of the primary exclusions, we're aware of how many of those roughly percentage would maybe have neurodiversities or SEN. I know we've probably not got that statistic, but we're aware that they're there. Yeah, and then the other thing was that I think, and Stuart will be able to confirm this, the other worry for me with young people on home education is those on child protection plans. But I think, does the new bill then protect against that? And we expect that by the end of, thanks.
Yes, so we always have a look at if we have a child on the child protection plan who's electively home educated, why, and do we feel that's appropriate? The new legislation will give us more powers to insist as well. But on the whole, we keep that under review. And my view is always education is protective.
Okay. Councillor Slater.
No, what is it with it? Right, I am on page 48 of our pack, which is about the EHC plans issued. And obviously, it's been a substantial change in the amount of time it's taking for the plans to be issued, which is obviously very, very welcome. Can you outline for us just briefly what has made this significant shift? Because obviously it's a huge increase on where we were sort of 6 months ago. So what's the difference and how are we going to maintain it?
It's quite a complex system, but if I was to summarise it in one way, it's that we now have enough capacity of educational psychologists to get through their part of their advice in time. So when you look at the data, I can see the data really clearly that when we see the upturn in quarter one, 23, 24, we had a combination of our own service and contracts with a provider to undertake what we needed to do for the year. They didn't deliver on what they said they would. So suddenly we moved again into backlog. where we are now is we have increased the team significantly, not as big as I'd like it to be still, and we're still working on that, but we now have a substantive team, and the contract with our provider for the rest of them is more mature. So they're delivering on their side of it, we're delivering on our side of it, which means we've been able to catch up on all the backlog, because a plan isn't out of date until you finalise it. So as we finalise them, you'll see from the beginning of it, you'll see the absolute numbers rocketing up, yet the performance falling. That's because it's only when you finish them do they become out of date, but eventually you catch up on that. So as we've got through the backlog, you'll see then the number of days to complete slide down, so it's much better, and then the increase. And I think even so in the next quarter will be even higher, because we know we're through the backlog, we know we've got capacity, and now we're undertaking them in a timely fashion, and that's better for everyone. That's the position we wanted to be in, but I'm also conscious that our ability to do that means we've taken probably capacity from other local authorities who now can't do that because there's not enough educational psychologists in the country to meet the demand of plans. But I am pleased. How will we protect that? We're continuing to invest in the team. We've done that very carefully, very slowly. We've benchmarked the numbers of assessments our own educational psychologists can do, and we're trying to protect their time then with another part of what they do that makes the job more interesting, so that they want to stay with us. That's some of the work we're doing strategically that we outlined around let's look at inclusion. They're doing all sorts of other bits of work, and then we'll keep building that team up, relying less on the contract of what we do, and try and maintain that rate. But I'm confident now we can do that in a way I wouldn't have been a year ago.
Thank you. I noticed everybody's shivering now. It's getting really cold in here. Thank you very much. Are there any more questions on the performance reports? I have to say, I mean, obviously, as a member of the Scrutiny Board, I actually see the quarterly performance reports and I find them very useful. And I think it's useful that they're now coming to the ONS committee. I'm judging by the nods around the chamber, I think people are in agreement with that. So thank you very much, Chris, for bringing that to us, and we will receive it again, another one in 6 months' time. Now, and I think what's happened was from the questions that you've raised that it's highlighted perhaps some of the areas of perhaps further scrutiny that we would like to put onto the work programme. So when we come to the work programme later on in the agenda, if there are specific things that you would like to be included, please say so. Okay, thank you very much. So now we come to item number 10, foster care update. And it's Rosie Appleby. Thank you, Rosie, Head of Placement Support.
So you've all had the report, so I wasn't going to go through every slide of the presentation, but just pick out some of the key themes. So in terms of the first slide, you'll see in terms of our looked after children, that's obviously which we've just talked about, that's gone up. So we've got 75% of all children in care in North Yorkshire. Just want to highlight that in terms of a positive of that is that the high proportion of children that are living in kinship arrangements. So that's 166, which is a year-on-year increase. So it's up from 8% in the previous year. So we're seeing an increase in that in line with our practice model, which is really positive, because obviously we want to see children within their network rather than coming into what we might refer to as stranger foster care. It also means that when children first become looked after, they're kind of placed within their network, so they're not having kind of moves that they don't need to have. So that's really positive, and we are seeing the increase in assessments within the fostering service in terms of the busyness of our panels, but getting carers approved and through the process. So that is positive. And our use of IFAs has continued to remain low, which is also something that we're proud of, because it means our children are within North Yorkshire and within our carers, which is what we want to see. I'm just going to skip over the next slide and just go on to the new foster carer approvals. So as I've just said, what we've seen is a continued increase in our family and friends. So you can't quite see it on there, but on the far right of the graph, you'll see that we've got an increasing number in terms of kinship carers that are coming through. So the red are the ones that are coming through in terms of assessments at the moment. So that's another 18 kinship approved carers that will have children placed with them that are coming through. And in terms of the blue at the bottom, you'll see that we've got an increase in our unrelated carers that are coming through, which is fantastic. Because we do know, sadly, for some children, there isn't anybody within the network and they need to come into unrelated foster care. In terms of our numbers of approved carers, that's increased to 538 from 518, which is another positive in terms of those increasing numbers. And then while we're talking about approvals, in terms of our recruitment activity, we're constantly thinking about new ways to attract carers to our fostering community. We've just had a really positive short breaks campaign on the BBC, which went through all the local look norths and then also got on the national news, which was fantastic. And we're just starting to see some of those enquiries come through on the back of that. We're also doing some myth bustings around foster care. Sometimes people will think it's kind of taking a child full time as opposed to perhaps sleepovers, respite, or those kind of short breaks arrangements. So we're doing that as well at the moment. We have seen an increase in our inquiries as well in Q1 to 67, which is really positive. If we just skip over the next one and come on to the unrelated deregistrations. So in terms of comparing the year-on-year deregistrations, it is well balanced and aligned. What we're seeing is more resignations in terms of our kinship carers, which is what we want to see, because that usually means that either an SGO is granted, there's a reunification plan to family, or the plan for that child has been finalised. So that is positive in terms of the difference between the unrelated and the kinship carers. When we have kinship carers that might be at that point of thinking about resigning, we would always have a conversation with them to try and encourage them to stay within fostering North Yorkshire and perhaps become an unrelated carer, and we have seen huge successes in that. In terms of the deregistrations for the unrelated carers, the common theme seems to be around ageing out, retirement. Also, the age of the children that they might be looking after is kind of reaching adulthood, and there's different kind of arrangements in place. That seems to be the kind of the theme when we do exit interviews for any carers that are leaving us as a service to kind of get feedback, which is really valuable. And then I was just going to talk about in terms of support to kinship and unrelated carers. So we would like to think that the support is equitable, but we know that sometimes different carers need different amounts of support. So it might be an unrelated carer that's taking kind of their first placement. It might be a kinship carer that perhaps is navigating family dynamics and contact, but we would be flexible as a service in terms of what that support looks like. In terms of service developments, we're really pleased to be expanding the Mockingbird service, which you'll see in the report. In terms of the numbers of carers and children within that is really, really positive. So we're just going live with our 4th hub, and we're also looking at a step down hub from our residential care, which is absolutely fantastic. And we've had a lot of interest in terms of carers wanting to be part of the Mockingbird. We've also invested in terms of updated training for those carers that are coming through in the process to make sure that they've got the best possible training that's available. So we've just done that. And then we've also, in terms of continued strong links with the care champions, we have somebody from the fostering service that has joined their group, thinking about how we can make sure that the voice of children is captured in terms of fostering panel and some of the other groups that we have, which is really positive. And then just to conclude, we had our event in July, which was what we used to call the kind of the fostering conference, but we completely changed it this year in terms of it being a family fun day, and we've had fantastic feedback about that, which it was a bit nerve-wracking in terms of completely changing it, but the feedback's been fantastic and it was a really, really positive day. So yeah.
I attended that, Chair, and it was a wonderful event, and I hope the adults attending got as much out of it as the young people who attending did.
The feedback from the carers was that they liked the informal nature, that they could have conversations, and it just wasn't quite so structured. And we had carers that linked up and kind of built their informal support network, which was really positive.
Thank you, Rosie. Are there any questions, please, from councillors? So, Stuart, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, no, I'm not going to ask a question, but what I'd like to say is I'm deeply proud of our fostering service, and it's a service that any other local authority would give its right arm for. And so they do a really good job. Pleased that we're seeing some of the turning inquiries and recruitment. It remains a challenge for everyone, but they do a really good job for us here in North Yorkshire. And you can see that in the figures, that just the vast amount of children who stay in North Yorkshire because of the approach we've got. And that's a lot of hard work for the team, who are constantly being berated around finding new placements. And Rosie lives that every day. And they do a really good job for us. I just wanted to say on record, you know, it's a fantastic bit of the service that I'm really proud of.
Councillor Goodrick.
Sorry, and I take on board everything you've said. And part of that is a lot of our foster children stay with their foster families beyond the age where I just wondered how many would stay with the families, because obviously if they stay with the families, quite often that means they're not available to foster another young person because they've stayed with the foster family. But that's brilliant, because that's how it should be, really. Sorry.
So yeah, so we have got an increase in terms of our staying put arrangement. We would always encourage children to kind of, you know, post 18 to stay with foster carers. It just means, as you say, we lose them as a resource for us as a service, but we do have a number of young people that decide to stay on with their foster carers, which we would always encourage.
I absolutely agree, but do we know how many?
So yeah, so this is on slide, so at Q1 we had 52.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question about the Mockingbird system that you've got. I've been looking at it, doing some research on it. You said that you're going to open the 4th club soon. Is North Yorkshire, is it going to be rolled out and adopted as the standard model?
So it is our model within the fostering service. So we've recruited to the 4th hub, and we're just in terms of the hub host, and we're just getting the other foster carers in terms of becoming part of that. But we do see it kind of increasing, and it is obviously, you can see from the numbers how successful that is. We do meet regularly with other local authorities in terms of sharing ideas and kind of, you know, good practice around it, just so that we can keep an eye in terms of the service development of that.
Following on from that, how are you identifying the sort of the people who are going to be part of the hub, if you like, the central, you know, the central foster carer, if you like?
So what tends to happen is there is a lot of discussions between foster carers, and sometimes we get far too many people that come forward. So there is a lot of word of mouth around the Mockingbird, but we put out comms to all the foster carers in North Yorkshire. So in terms of the geography of where the hubs are, the one that we're just going live with now, the 4th hub, is in Selby, to make sure that in terms of geography we're covered. And obviously that is for kinship and unrelated carers.
Councillor Timothy.
Thank you. It's about the slide. It's actually the slide that we skipped over on the age profile of foster carers, which is page 81 in our papers. So I've noticed that the data on that slide only goes back to 2021. I fully appreciate you might not have this to hand right now, but how far back do we actually have data for, sort of on record? Because obviously, if we're only looking at the data for sort of 4 years, 5 years of the age of foster carers, it's going, if it's the same people, their age is only going to change marginally. So I'd be really interested, and I fully appreciate you might have to come back to me on this, but I'd be really interested to see like how far back that data goes, and whether that 55 to 59 age group has always, you know, as long as we've had data, been that largest cohort.
I think it has. I'll let Mel, because this might be before my time in terms of when that started.
Yes, certainly. We can get the data in terms of the time element if we've been recording this. However, what we know is that often foster carers who come and want to be caring come from the older age range. because they've got space in their room, in their home. The adult children move on, go off to university, so they've got that spare capacity, and so we know that often that cohort is around of that age. So, but we can absolutely check and get that data for you and come back. Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question about unaccompanied asylum seekers. Are they placed in supportive living or in foster care?
So we have a number of children that are placed with our foster carers. They are usually under the age of 16. We do have some children that are placed in supported accommodation, and that they can be aged 16 to 18. However, what we do, we make sure that we assess their needs, make sure that they're able to manage semi-supported living and independence skills. So it's really based on the assessment of need, determining where they should be placed.
Didn't put the mic on. Any other questions? No, we're all quite happy with the report. Okay, you mentioned about the ageing profile, obviously. What is the sort of average age of carers at the moment? Are they, hate to say, are they a dying breed in terms of people? We're moving on to other systems as they're moving out of it.
It's really from 55 to 69, the highest points.
Councillor Slater.
Yeah, can I just ask a really short question? Just there was some information provided in the data about the GCSE outcomes for looked after children, and there would just seem to be lots of years where our data was missing, and I just wondered what was the reason. So the North Yorkshire column only appears like 3 times or something in the... Sorry, so let me just find the page again, actually.
Page 76, I think.
Okay, page 76. There's a graph about outcomes for English and Maths GCSE for looked after children, and it includes North Yorkshire, Yorkshire and the Humber, statistical neighbours and England, but just the North Yorkshire column was just missing on a few years, and I wasn't sure why we weren't able to have the data for that.
Well, the answer is I don't know. We do have data for each of our years, so that's maybe something we can have a look at and understand why No. I mean, it's a small cohort and it changes dramatically, and it's much more about, for us, about their expected level, because you can't compare it to a national kind of thing. So we have an annual report from our virtual school head that has all this data in, and I've had one of those every year that I've been here. I go through it with them religiously. So I don't know why the data isn't in there, apart from we're maybe missing a couple of the COVID years when it wasn't reportable, but we're reporting on other people. So let us have a look at the data and we'll come back, because I know we do have data for every year. Yeah.
I have another question again. I know we're working towards, and I think it's good, more towards children, kinship fostering. I think that's a very positive move. What percentage of children going into care actually have multiple placements? Is it high, or what is it?
Depending on their circumstances and trying to establish and do the assessments of family members sometimes takes a little bit of time. They decide to, you need to place a child immediately, but you do some work around who's in the family, who's in the network, and who can care for that child, and going through all the processes. So you can get some moves. Some moves are positive, and there's other children that have very complex needs, often around neurodiversity, and it's about making sure that we've got the right support to those carers with children with really complex high needs, but they are usually small cohorts.
Thank you. Anything else? No. Well, thank you very much for the report. Thank you to Amanda and to Rosie and Mel. Thank you. Right, we move on to agenda item 11, adoption update. And again, Rosie is going to be presenting this. Thank you.
Okay, so I won't go through all the slides again, just because obviously you've had the reports. So if we start with the slide, the adoptions. So you'll see in here, adoptions for North Yorkshire remains low, which is fantastic because it's obviously in line with our practice model and also relates to what you've heard in the fostering slide in terms of children being within their kinship kind of connected network. So we're not seeing as many children coming through, which is fantastic. Low numbers mean that only the children who really need a plan are coming through. We're seeing that those children where we do have an adoption plan are getting through to panel timely in terms of matching and then placing with adoptive family, and our scorecard on that is positive. We have just done some work with Adoption UK with a cohort of North Yorkshire foster carers and North Yorkshire adopters around kind of introductions, moving children on from foster care, which is fantastic that they've been part of that kind of national group. So we've got that information to kind of cascade out. If we just go on to the next slide. So in terms of children with an ADM approval, and when we're talking about ADM, that's known as the agency decision maker. So it comes, a child will come to an agency decision maker once all assessments of the family members, connected carers, anybody has been completed. And unfortunately, we haven't identified anybody to care for that child. So I just wanted to highlight on here because you'll see it looks quite high with 11, but that does include siblings within that in terms of why that does look higher compared to previous periods. Most of our children within North Yorkshire are placed within the Regional Adoption Agency, which is really positive because it means they're staying in the Yorkshire and Humber area, which is what we want in terms of connections and ongoing contact with family members. The only time we tend to go out is if it's to do with a cultural match and we can't match in-house. If we just skip through the next slide and go on to the adopters recruited. So this is really positive in terms of our numbers of assessments in North Yorkshire. At the moment in Q2, we've got 5, which isn't on there, but that will be more than the last period, which is positive in terms of the national shortage of adopters. So North Yorkshire is still assessing and seeing adopters come through, which is fantastic because then obviously we are placing children with our adopters. In terms of recruitment activity, that's led by the Regional Adoption Agency. It's really positive in terms of some of the events that we've got. Last weekend we were at Pride in Scarborough, which wasn't just recruitment but also to get the message out there in terms of our support service and what that looks like. We're also holding in-person recruitment events, but the majority of prospective adopters do prefer online events, so the turnout hasn't been quite as high, but we do have a high number that are coming to online sessions to find out about adoption. If we just go on to the adoption support contacts. So we remain committed in terms of supporting adopters at every stage of the adoption journey and keeping that relationship with adopters through the process once a child is placed and then hopefully an adoption order is granted. And we can see that from the number of open cases of people coming to us wanting the support at any point. In terms of support, we're collaborating pan-regionally with One Adoption South and One Adoption West in terms of some initiatives and really kind of link up with them. The 3 regional agencies work very closely with each other. There have been some challenges which you'll see in the report around the Adoption Special Guardianship Fund and agreement in terms of continuing funding. Last year, there was a big delay in an announcement around whether our families could apply for the Adoption Support Fund. We have just been told that we can put in applications for continuing to support for the next financial year, which is really positive that that's come out so soon. What I would say is that North Yorkshire has been committed in terms of training up of their staff. So a lot of our staff in North Yorkshire are trained in therapeutic approaches, whether that's DDP, NVR, Theraplay. So we do have staff in-house that do deliver interventions with children and with families, which is positive. And in terms of, so I was just going to touch on, in terms of disruptions. So when we're talking about adoption disruptions, that happens before an adoption order is placed and the child is a looked after child. In terms of North Yorkshire, for over the last 5 years, we've had 0 disruptions, which is really, really positive in terms of making sure that matching is right and the support for adopters. In terms of family breakdowns post-adoption order, again, the numbers are very low in North Yorkshire, which is positive. And obviously the family assessment and support team would become involved at that point. And then in terms of just ending on a positive note, we've just had our summer picnic, which is an annual event for adopters, which has been absolutely fantastic. And we've had a high turnover of families. We have some children that started coming when they were very, very small, and they're now kind of teenagers, because it is such a positive event and adopters kind of connecting with other adoptive families.
Thank you, Rosie. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Slater.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. Obviously, you touched on the, and I'll get the acronym wrong every time. Is it ASGSF? The adoption, and that's the one. I think we all agree that, yeah, but having it definitely in place for another year is incredibly helpful, incredibly reassuring for families who desperately rely on it. Obviously, unfortunately, the amount that a child could be claimed for a child has decreased, which is obviously outside of our control here. But I'm just wondering what impact you're anticipating that we might see as a council from that. You know, therapy costs a lot in North Yorkshire, and so the individual amounts going down, we expect will have some kind of impact. I'm just wondering what we think it might look like.
I can come in there. At the regional adoption board meeting, those questions were asked there, and what we can see is that actually providers are changing their prices and costings in line with the fund, which tends to happen. That's been a pattern over the many years that the Adoption Support Fund and then SGO Fund has been there. So we're monitoring that really closely through the board, and we will just be making sure that we're having those conversations with providers. But as it stands now, they are changing their packages.
Sorry, and then completely unrelated, the contacts. There's referred to safe and meaningful contact guidelines. Am I right in thinking this is in the specialist programme? Sorry, this is the kind of support that you're offering. When we're saying contact guidelines, are we talking about contact with biological families? Is that what this refers to? Sorry, yeah, we're on, in the page of your report, it's page 4. In our packets, page 92.
Yeah, so there was the public law working group in terms of the adoption reforms, which obviously there was a lot of focus in terms of contact. So we have to pulled together this training programme, which is just in terms of looking at contact. So staff are involved in that, thinking about care planning for children, those lasting contact arrangements and what that might look like, and also making sure that our adopters are prepared for any contact arrangements, and so delivering that training as part of their kind of recruitment and assessment process.
So what we've seen over time really is that often it will be post-adoption. Yeah. It will be a letter sent on an annual basis, say birthdays or Christmas, whereas it's very clear now that time has moved on, and research tells us that it's better to have some connection with family and birth family, and so we need to make sure that we follow that research and implement that. So we work through very carefully through assessment and the plan as to what is the best plan for that child.
Ask a question. You were talking to Mr. Shepherd this morning, the gentleman who talked about adoption breakdown, and you said that obviously North Yorkshire doesn't have a separate policy on family breakdown when it comes to adoption, because then once the child's adopted, they come under the Children's Act and are treated, if you like, as normal children, for want of a better word.
So before the adoption order is made, the child is still a looked after child. and so the responsibility of the local authority. When the adoption order is granted through the court, that legal basis becomes they become the parent. Yeah. So they're the parent, and so it's a family arrangement. So we would treat those families as we would all families. Yeah. And so we have the process of assessment and understanding what is happening in a child's life and the family's life, and how can we best support. So we work within the Children Act and the assessment framework.
Thank you, that's quite clear. I mean, I think what was concerning was he actually said that he was threatened by social workers with not looking after the child abandonment, I think was the term he used.
We don't threaten any parents. What we have to do is explain to them all the legal requirements that we work with them. And so it's explaining that to parents. Often this is at a time of distress and crisis, and it can be really challenging for them. And, you know, we can see the impact it has on families, and we are there to support, but we do have a duty to make sure they understand the framework in which we have to work.
Councillor Goodrick.
Yeah.
So as Rosie says, pre-order, we've had 0 over a period of time, which is very positive. That's what we want to see. Post-order, it's a bit more challenging because it's about whether or not the family want to share with you that this child is adopted or not. So, you know, it's small numbers, very small numbers, because actually what we want to do is work with those families to prevent that breakdown, as we would any family. Children are better when they are at home or with their family or network.
Just the last point I'd make about all breakdowns of any sort, whether it's adoption or not, is deeply distressing for all concerned, the parents, the family, children. It is a messy and difficult thing. We don't say to social workers threaten people with, but the other thing that I can give you some comfort from is there is a statutory 3-stage process for complaints into children's social care that work their way through a different process to a corporate complaints process. So it's set by legislation, it's set by law. There's a stage 1, stage 2, independent, stage 3, appeal panel, and then to ombudsman. So these are rigorously looked at in terms of complaints, and I can assure you that complaint has been through the right processes. And we genuinely, I'm not naive. I know we get things wrong at times, and we need to know that and understand it. And any actions through any of those stages are taken seriously and go back in informed process. But they are just deeply distressing, emotional things for parents and children. So, whatever we do, it is just difficult at times.
Sorry, one final question from me, and it is fairly personal, but nothing to do with this authority, because I've got family who are going through the adoption process at the moment, and I've got friends who've already gone through the adoption process. And in another authority, they are encouraging continual face-to-face contact with the birth parents. Is that something that this authority will be pursuing?
Yeah, we're certainly seeing that in terms of the children that are coming through for agency decision. We are seeing creative contact plans and ongoing contact, whether that's once a year or twice. What we also know is that a lot of our children tend to have siblings, and it's really sad when those sibling relationships get lost. So we're seeing a lot of children coming through where it's proposed there's direct contact with siblings, not just with parents. So adopters are prepared for that at the first point of them coming to us. Thank
you very much. Yeah. Any other questions on that? No, thank you. Thank you very much, Rosie and Mel, for that this morning. We can move on now to work programme on item number 12, the work programme for 25-26. Obviously, it might. Sorry, thank you very much. Sorry, Councillor Lund first.
Yeah, I noticed in the December one, we're having updates on the send. I've already spoken to Stuart about I'm satisfied with what is happening, but I just thought maybe Stuart would like to get this body up to date. It's going to be dealt with at tomorrow's Selby Area Committee. Thank you.
Yes, so just to avoid any confusion. There we go. There's been announcements that a trust, an independent trust, has bought the ex-Carlton Holy Family site, which they have done. That's a property that belongs to the diocese. It's up to the diocese what they do with their ex-property. This is an independent school. I have no doubt it will try to sell us places at a certain cost, but I have no point or idea of what category or type of child they are going to take, and they certainly are not in consultation. What I want to make just waiting for some confirmation from DfE around that the building programme has been allocated, and we can then do some comms on that, but it doesn't change that at all. It's completely different. It's an independent provider. There'll be profit making, and I was going to say good luck to them, but not really.
Thank you for that clarification, because and for the fact that it's going to the ACC tomorrow. Otherwise, we'd have brought it to the mid-cycle briefing in November, but we don't need to now. Thank you. Councillor Poskett.
Thank you, Chair. I think you might have alluded to this in something else that you were quite keen to dig into as well, and it might be covered off in the December meeting, but I'd be quite keen to get a greater learning of the correlation between SEND needs and the exclusion rise in primary schools and secondaries, actually. My own personal experience is this is something that's on the increase, and I think it's really important when we see an increase in primary schools exclusion that we understand actually that a lot of that might be because those young people are not access to mainstream education might not be the best place to meet their needs. So I just would like to see a little bit of more information, and it might be covered off on the SEND update, might be school attendance update. I think that would be good. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll put it on the agenda. Anybody else like to add something to the? Sorry, Councillor Slater.
Yeah, and again, this might already be covered in the SEND update, but I think it might be pertinent to try and get an update in the December meeting on the proposed special school in Harrogate on the old Woodfield school site, just an update as to where we're at.
So Stuart.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to update before then. So I know some decisions have been taken in the last few days by the regional school commissioner. They've just not been they've not been communicated yet. So all of that is good news. It will get us moving on that. So we know the building's ready. We just need a sponsor confirming so they can then start taking it over. So I know that decision's been made now. I just can't say what it is yet.
Okay, any other items for that? Okay, number 13, any other items? I'd just like to inform you, I have received a letter in the post this morning here from Settle College. It is about the home to school transport policy, and I've only had a brief look through it. But the governors, the governing body of Settle College, have asked that this letter be distributed to all members of this appeals committee. Alice has received an electronic version and will be sending it out to everybody on the Home to School Transport Appeals Committee, but probably everybody on this committee as well, I imagine. Yes, yeah.
Should that go through appeals committee, through the appeals? If it's going to the appeals committee, it should go to the appeals clerk.
Oversight. It's actually for the scrutiny committee.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's actually addressed to the scrutiny committee.
When you said appeals.
I did. I said appeals.
Sorry.
It should go to the scrutiny committee for everybody to have a look at. So that will be sent out to everybody from Alice. Okay. So Stuart.
I'm sure I'll get a copy of that at some point then, Chair.
Sorry, just to pick up on that, is it appropriate that the appeals committee see it as well?
Well, that's open for discussion.
Committee that are here,
here.
and some members who are not here.
Then, with everybody's agreement, we'll send it to the appeals committee as well. Yeah, to members of the appeals committee. I'm quite happy with
I'm
that.
just covering all bases.
Yeah. Okay, I think this is Sir Stuart's last scrutiny meeting with us. Okay, so on behalf of the committee members, I'd like to thank you for the work that you've been doing in the period of time that you've been with North Yorkshire Council, and for your contributions certainly to the scrutiny committee as well. 7 years you've been with us, and wish you well in whatever you're going to do. As I said in my email to you, I can't imagine you going out to play bowls, but whichever, let us know.
I don't think so. No, thank you, Chair. It's over 8 years, and it's been the absolute privilege of my career to work in North Yorkshire. I've always said to everyone, it's a fantastic place to live and work. And, you know, I know we all have our differences and politics and all that kind of thing, but, you know, I'm proud of what we've done here. I wanted to come somewhere that matched my ambition around things for children who have a lot of disadvantage in their lives. And, you know, we've provided a children's service of national renown and recognition, and some might argue, but we've always tried to do the right thing for most children here, and it's been an absolute pleasure, and I wish my permanent successor, whenever we get to there, I haven't used the word irreplaceable. I haven't said that at all to anyone, but it has been an absolute privilege of my career working here. So I wish all the committee well in its future endeavours, and the council well moving forward. And yes, I'm not quite ready to not do anything yet, but I won't do a permanent DCS job anywhere else. I've just stayed here. It's not because I'm being made to leave, which a lot of us is a good thing, but we'll see what I do next time. Who knows? But thank you.
Not pipe and slippers yet.
Not quite, not quite, yeah. No. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. So finally, I'd just like to confirm the next meeting is Wednesday, 17th of December at 10 o'clock in the Grand, and wish you all a good week. I'm sorry?
Can we get the